you watch someone else get chosen. Again, again, the one with the stronger resume, the louder voice, the cleaner story, and you're left standing there, quietly asking God why your effort seems invisible. It stings in a way that's hard to explain, not just disappointment, something deeper, like being overlooked on purpose. I felt that ache sit heavy in my chest, wondering if I was simply not enough. Then Scripture starts to press gently against that thought. The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. That was spoken when David wasn't even invited into the room. Everyone assumed a better option stood right there. Stronger, older, more impressive. And yet, God chose the one no one expected. It doesn't erase the pain of being passed over, but it reframes it, because maybe the silence isn't rejection. Maybe the waiting isn't wasted. Maybe God is not ignoring you. He's seeing something others can't, something even you might not fully understand yet. Number 1. God sees what people cannot see. That moment with David wasn't random. It revealed something steady and unchanging about how God works. While everyone else was measuring height, strength, and presence, God was looking somewhere no one else thought to look. The prophet Samuel stood in front of Jesse's sons, and one by one, the obvious choices passed by. Each one looked right. Each one seemed like the better option. And yet, God kept saying no. It must have been confusing in that room. Because by human judgment, the answer seemed clear. But God wasn't operating on human judgment. He spoke directly into that moment with words that still challenge us today. For the Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. That wasn't just about David. That was about how God sees every person in every generation. We naturally notice what is visible. Confidence, 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 confidence. Success. Even in faith, we can start to believe that those who appear stronger must be more chosen. But God's focus is deeper. He sees motives when no one is watching. He sees faith when it's still small and quiet. He sees obedience in the hidden places where no applause exists. David wasn't building a reputation when he was in the fields. He was tending sheep, protecting what was entrusted to him, singing, praying, learning to trust God in solitude. No audience, no recognition. But God was watching, and that unseen life mattered more than any public display could have. There's something both humbling and comforting about that, because it means God's attention is not drawn to what impresses people. It's drawn to what is real, a heart that is soft toward Him, a spirit that is willing to listen, a life that chooses faithfulness, even when no one else notices. And this is where many people struggle, because we want to be seen now. We want affirmation, confirmation, some kind of visible sign that we matter. But God's way often feels quiet, hidden, almost like nothing is happening. Yet in that hidden place, He is forming something deeper than recognition. He is shaping the heart. David didn't become worthy the moment he was chosen. He was chosen because of who he already was before anyone noticed. That unseen devotion, that private faith, that steady trust, that was what God saw, and that is what mattered. So when it feels like others are being chosen over you, it may not be because you are lacking. Maybe because God is looking at something different entirely, something others cannot measure, something that is still being formed in you. And that leads to a difficult but freeing truth. What looks like weakness to others might actually be the very place where God is choosing to work next. Number 2, weakness is not a disqualification. And that place, where things feel thin, uncertain, even fragile, is often exactly where God begins to move. Not after the weakness is gone, but right in the middle of it. Because what we call a disadvantage, God often uses as an opening. The Bible does not hide the weaknesses of those God chooses. It brings them into the light. Moses stood before God and immediately pointed to his limitation. His speech. He did not feel capable, not even close. Yet God didn't step back and search for someone more polished. He answered him directly. Who has made man's mouth? Now therefore go, and I will be with your mouth and teach you what you shall speak. Exodus 4:11-12. That response shifts everything. God did not deny Moses' weakness. He simply showed that it was not the deciding factor. We often think readiness means having no gaps, no fears, no struggles left. But Scripture tells a different story. Weakness is not something God waits to remove before He calls you. It is often the very reason He calls you, because it keeps the focus where it belongs, not on human ability, but on divine strength. The Apostle Paul the Apostle understood this deeply. He spoke openly about his own struggles, something he described as a thorn. He asked God to take it away more than once. But the answer he received was not removal. It was reassurance. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. 2 Corinthians 12:9. And Paul didn't resist that truth. He accepted it, even embraced it. That goes against how we naturally think. Because we're taught to hide weakness, to fix it quickly, to present strength at all times. But God is not drawn to performance. He is drawn to dependence. And weakness creates that dependence in a way strength often cannot. When someone appears to be the better option, it's usually because they seem more complete, more capable, more ready. But that kind of strength can quietly lead to self-reliance, and self-reliance leaves little room for God's power to be seen clearly. The one who knows they are weak, however, leans differently. They listen more closely. They trust more deeply. They move with a kind of humility that keeps them connected to God, not just in moments of crisis, but in every step. This doesn't mean weakness is easy. It can feel frustrating, even discouraging. But in God's hands, it is never wasted. It becomes a place where His strength can be revealed, not in theory, but in real, visible ways. So instead of disqualifying you, your weakness may be positioning you, not for your own recognition, but for something greater, to show that what happens next could not have come from you alone. And that begins to reveal another layer of how God chooses, not just based on what you can do, but on something even more important. Number 3, God chooses the available, not just the able. And that something more important often comes down to a simple, quiet response: willingness. Not perfection, not certainty, just a heart that says yes, even while still feeling unsure. Because ability can exist without surrender. A person can be skilled, experienced, even respected, and still hold back from fully yielding to God. But availability is different. It's not about having everything together. It's about being open, responsive, and ready to follow when God calls. You see this clearly in the life of Isaiah. When he encountered the presence of God, he became deeply aware of his own unworthiness. He didn't present himself as strong or qualified. In fact, he acknowledged his weakness openly. Yet in that same moment, when God asked, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Isaiah responded, "Here am I. Send me." Isaiah 6:8. That response didn't come from confidence in himself. It came from a willingness to trust God despite his own limitations. There's something powerful about that kind of availability. It doesn't wait until everything makes sense. It doesn't require full clarity before taking a step. It simply chooses to trust that if God is calling, then God will also sustain. We often delay our response because we feel unprepared. We think we need more knowledge, more strength, more certainty before we can say yes. But throughout Scripture, God calls people before they feel ready, not after. Even Peter the Apostle shows this pattern. He was not the most stable, not the most consistent, and certainly not the most polished. Yet when Jesus called him, he followed. Imperfectly, yes, but genuinely. And that willingness became the foundation for everything that followed. Ability can impress people, but availability moves the heart of God. Because availability invites relationship, it creates space for God to guide, to correct, to grow someone over time. And this is where the difference becomes clear. The better option may look ready on the outside, but may not be open on the inside, while the one God chooses may feel unsure, but is fully willing to be led. God is not searching for flawless people. He is looking for those who will respond to him, those who will step forward, even with questions still in their mind, those who will trust him enough to move, even when the path is not fully visible. That kind of yes matters more than we realize. Because it's not just the beginning of a calling, it's the beginning of a journey where God himself becomes the one shaping the outcome. And when that happens, the result doesn't point back to human readiness. That points somewhere else entirely. So, number 4, his choice brings glory to him, not to man. And that somewhere else becomes unmistakable when you look at the outcome. When God chooses in a way that surprises people, the result cannot be easily explained by human ability. It points beyond the person. It points back to him. This is not accidental. God is intentional in how he chooses, because he is intentional about where the glory goes. If the strongest, most impressive person is always selected, then the story easily becomes about them, their discipline, their talent, their effort. But when God chooses someone unexpected, the outcome forces a different conclusion. You see this clearly with Gideon. He was already unsure of himself, already questioning how anything significant could come through him. And yet, when God called him to lead, the situation became even more unusual. Instead of strengthening Gideon with a larger army, God reduced it. Step by step, the numbers decreased until it no longer made sense from a human perspective. And God explained why. The people with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel boast over me, saying, my own hand has saved me. Judges 7:2. That verse reveals something direct and unfiltered. God is not only concerned with the victory, he is concerned with the interpretation of that victory. Who gets the credit? Where does the glory land? If Gideon had won with overwhelming strength, people could have easily said it was strategy, numbers, or power. But with weakness, with limitation, with something that looked insufficient, the only explanation left was God. And this pattern continues throughout Scripture. The outcome is designed in such a way that it cannot be traced back to human strength alone. Even in the New Testament, Paul the Apostle writes, but we have this treasure in jars of clay, to show that the surpassing power belongs to God and not to us. 2 Corinthians 4:7. The image is simple but powerful. Something valuable is placed inside something fragile, not to weaken it but to make the source of its power unmistakable. We often want to be strong enough to carry everything on our own. But if we could, we might also be tempted to take the credit. And that subtle shift, where attention moves from God to us, is exactly what God avoids. So when he chooses someone who seems less obvious, less polished, less ideal, it is not a mistake. It is a deliberate decision that protects the purpose of the story, so that when the result comes, people don't just see what happened, they recognize who made it happen. This can be difficult to accept, especially when we're comparing ourselves to others, because it feels like we are being measured by a different standard. And in a way, we are. God is not asking, who looks the best for this? He is asking, who will allow me to be seen through this? And that question shifts everything. Because it means being chosen is not about proving your worth, it's about revealing his. And sometimes, That process begins in a place we would never expect, a place where rejection has already happened. Number 5. Rejection by people often precedes selection by God. And that place, where doors close, where your name is overlooked, where you feel quietly set aside, often becomes the very ground where God begins his work. Not after acceptance, but sometimes right after rejection. David's story doesn't just show that God sees differently. It shows that people can completely miss what God is about to raise up. When Samuel came to Jesse's house, David wasn't even considered worth calling in at first. He was left out in the field, unseen, unmentioned. It wasn't hostility, it was dismissal. And yet that overlooked position did not disqualify him. It marked the very moment God was about to choose him. Scripture records it plainly. Then Samuel said to Jesse, "Are all your sons here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, but behold, he is keeping the sheep." 1 Samuel 16:11. The one left out became the one called in. That pattern appears again and again. Joseph was rejected by his own brothers, misunderstood, even betrayed. From a human perspective, his story looked like a downward path. But what seemed like rejection was actually positioning. Years later, when everything unfolded, the purpose became clear, not just for him, but for many others. Rejection has a way of shaping how we see ourselves. It can quietly convince us that we are not chosen, not valuable, not enough. And if we're not careful, we begin to agree with voices that were never meant to define us. But God does not build his decisions on human approval. He is not influenced by who includes you or excludes you. His calling is not a reaction to people. It is rooted in his own purpose. Even Jesus Christ himself experienced this. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53:3, the one sent with the greatest purpose was not widely accepted. In fact, rejection became part of the path that fulfilled that purpose. That changes how we understand our own experiences.
Our grace rejection is no longer just something painful. It becomes something that can carry meaning, not because the pain is good, but because God can work through it in ways we do not immediately see.
Being overlooked does not mean being forgotten. Being dismissed does not mean being disqualified. Sometimes it simply means that people are making decisions based on what they can see, and God is working based on what they know nothing about. And in that hidden space, something important is happening. Which brings us to another truth that is not always easy to hold on to. God is not just working in the moment you're in. He is working across something much larger than you can currently see. Number 6, God is writing a bigger story than we can see, and that something much larger often unfolds in ways we would never predict. Because God is not choosing based on a single moment. He is shaping an entire story, one that stretches far beyond what we can see right now. When we look at our lives, we tend to focus on the present. What is happening? What is not happening? What feels delayed or denied? But God is not limited to that narrow view. He sees the beginning, the middle, and the outcome all at once. His choices are connected to purposes that may take years, even generations, to fully understand. The life of Joseph makes this clear. There was a long stretch where nothing about his situation looked chosen. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, imprisoned. Each step seemed to move him further away from anything meaningful. If you paused the story there, it would look like loss, not purpose. But later, when everything came together, Joseph said something that reveals the deeper layer of God's work. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive. Genesis 50:20. That statement didn't erase the hardship. It reframed it, because what looked like a series of disconnected, painful events was actually part of a larger design. This is where our understanding often struggles. Because we want clarity early. We want to know why something is happening while we are still in it. But God rarely unfolds the full picture that way. He leads step by step, often asking us to trust Him before we can fully see what He is doing. Even in the New Testament, Paul the Apostle speaks about this limited perspective. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. 1 Corinthians 13:12. That means our understanding is partial. We see fragments, not the full design. So when God chooses someone who doesn't seem like the better option, it may not make sense in the moment. It may even feel confusing or unfair, but His choice is not based on immediate appearance. It is tied to a purpose that unfolds over time. There are connections you cannot see yet. Outcomes that depend on your obedience today. People who may be impacted years from now because of something God is building quietly in your life right now. And that requires a different kind of trust. Not trust based on visible results, but trust rooted in who God is. That He is faithful, that He is intentional, that nothing He allows or chooses is without purpose. Because when the story finally comes together, it often reveals something we could not have understood earlier. That every step, even the confusing ones, had a place, log. And as that purpose begins to unfold, something else becomes clear. God is not just working through the person He chooses, He is also working deeply within them along the way. Number 7. The chosen one is transformed through the calling, and that inner work becomes impossible to ignore over time. Because God doesn't choose someone and leave them unchanged. The calling itself becomes a process, a steady shaping, refining, correcting, and strengthening that happens along the journey. When God calls, He is not affirming a finished product. He is beginning a transformation. You see this clearly in the life of Peter the Apostle. At the beginning, Peter was impulsive, often speaking before thinking, bold but inconsistent. He had moments of deep faith, but also moments of fear. One of the most painful examples was when he denied Jesus 3 times. That failure could have defined him. It could have ended his story, but it didn't. After the resurrection, Jesus met Peter again, not to reject him, but to restore him. In that quiet but powerful moment, Peter was not only forgiven, he was recommissioned, and over time, the same man who once wavered became steady, courageous, and faithful under pressure. Scripture captures this refining process in a broader way. After you have suffered a little while, will Himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. 1 Peter 5:10. That wasn't written from theory. It came from someone who had lived through that transformation. This is what the calling of God does. It exposes weaknesses, not to shame, but to reshape. It allows pressure not to break, but to build endurance. It leads through situations that stretch faith, deepen trust, and form character over time. We often think we need to become ready before God can use us. But the truth is, readiness is something God develops within us as we walk with Him. The process is not always comfortable. There are moments of correction, moments of waiting, moments of facing parts of ourselves we would rather avoid, but none of it is wasted. Free. Even David, after being chosen, did not immediately step into the fullness of his role. There were years of preparation, seasons of difficulty, times where his faith was tested deeply. Yet through all of that, he was being shaped into the kind of leader God intended him to be. This changes how we understand being chosen. It's not a moment of arrival, it's the beginning of a journey. A journey where God is actively involved, not just in what you do, but in who you are becoming. And that means the focus shifts. Losh no longer about comparing yourself to others or trying to prove that you were the better option. Losh no longer about impleo etsa blus edois to tell it. Loose about allowing God to do His work in you, trusting that He knows exactly what He is forming. Because in the end, the power of the story is not just that God chose someone unexpected. When tiawata samthariu is that through that choice, He created something new within them, something that could only be shaped by walking with Him. Conclusion. Chosen for a reason beyond understanding. Being chosen by God has never followed human logic. It doesn't align with who looks strongest, most prepared, or most impressive. Again and again, He chooses in a way that challenges what we expect and invites us to trust something deeper than appearances. What feels like delay, weakness, or even rejection may not be the end of the story. It may be part of a process that is still unfolding. God's choices are not rushed, and they are never without purpose. So instead of asking why someone else seems like the better option, the question gently shifts. Am I willing to trust how God sees, even when I don't fully understand it yet? Because His way is not about proving worth. It's about fulfilling purpose. And that purpose is always greater than what we can see in the moment.